This sermon has 3 parts. It's Trinity Sunday. So 3 parts, 1 sermon. How clever is that? And 1 part has 3 subparts in it. But don't worry, it's not too complicated. I mean, why would you expect a sermon on the Trinity to be complicated, right? So I'm going to say 3 things about the Trinity, 3 answers to a question that we've been kind of circling around since Holy Week, at least. Who is this God we worship? It's a pretty fundamental question, right? So let me start, though, with a disclaimer. There's nothing we can say about God that is really adequate. No way to capture or do justice to who God is. And that's the first point. Our God is mystery. When my stepdaughter was attending Holy Names, she had a religious education course, and they were covering the Trinity, as if, right? So she's doing her homework one day, and her dad is in the room with her, and I was in the next room, so I could hear their conversation, and she's trying to make sense of what she had been taught. So, God is 3, and God is 1 at the same time? Okay. Do we believe that? And my husband, who's kind of agnostic but pretty open-minded and didn't want to get in the way of her faith, he goes, yeah. And the dear child says, so that's a no, right? And I'm in the next room going, no, wait, we totally believe that. Yes, we do. But my version of being a stepmom did not include just jumping into heavy conversations and taking over. So I did find a moment later, though, to say to her, look, God is infinite and we are finite. If you could get your head around God, like if God were something we could fully understand, what kind of God would that be? I mean, that God would be less than us, not greater. And the scriptures tell us as much, don't they? When Job demands explanations from God for the existence of evil and suffering, God doesn't give Job the answer. What God does say is, where were you, Mr. Smarty Pants, when I created the heavens and the earth? Isaiah is told, as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. So that's Isaiah put in his place. And a favorite of mine comes from the book of Ecclesiastes and says, God is in heaven and you upon earth. Therefore, let your words be few. So I should probably sit down right now. The doctrine of the Trinity kind of reminds me of a Zen koan. A koan, K-O-A-N, is a story or a saying that presents some kind of puzzle or paradox which the Zen master gives to the student to meditate on. But there's no way it can be resolved with the intellect. The whole point is to exhaust all the analytical strategies that the student might use to solve the koan, so they eventually will have to find their way to a response that goes to a deeper level beyond just reasoning. And so when the student has made this leap, then they're moving in the direction of a higher awareness, a greater truth. A koan invites a response, not an answer or a solution. To try to solve it misses the point. Similarly, there's no solution to the puzzle of Trinity, 3 who are also 1. Remember when Moses asked God's name, and he's told, I am who I am. Like you can picture the divine shrug, right? I am who I am. That's what Moses gets, that's all he gets. It's tempting to reach for the perfect metaphor or generate huge amounts of text to try to pin it down, but it won't be pinned down. It refuses to be pinned. However, having said that, a name for God that we get later reveals more. Emmanuel, God with us. God with us, not God understood by us, not God we can capture and domesticate, but God with us. We may not fully understand God, but this we know from the incarnation. Though we don't totally understand this mysterious God, we know that this God is with us. The whole story of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection tells us that God is with us always, as Jesus said, to the end of the age. This is something beautiful about our faith. At the very center of it, at its very heart, there's mystery. And there always will be. We could get a dozen degrees in theology, we could spend the rest of our lives meditating on it every day, but it will remain a mystery. So rather than trying to just grasp hold of it or pin it down or explain it, we should take the advice of that other St. Paul, McCartney, and just let it be. The second thing I want to say about the Trinity is very familiar to us. Our God is loving community. God is love, the scriptures tell us. And love implies both a lover and a beloved. In fact, it was St. Augustine of Hippo who famously described the Creator as lover, the Son as beloved, and the Spirit as the love exchanged between the two. Lover, beloved, and love. So, here's the thing. God is three, yes, but with a constant mutual desire between the persons, an attraction toward union, toward oneness, that is so powerful that it is perfectly fulfilled, and they are one. And the good news is that in Christ, God has extended a hand and pulled us into that circle of love. Because God's attraction is to us as well. That's why we were created. Attraction is one of the most fundamental and powerful forces in the universe. Whether you're talking about gravity or sexuality, creatures are drawn toward each other because the origin of all of it is love. And though we know God is a mystery, it's a mystery that in some ways desires to be known to us. As a wise person said, God is transcendent, not aloof. Well, love, whatever. We know we're supposed to love God and we're supposed to love our neighbor and that these are really important. And Jesus did answer the question of who is my neighbor by saying it's basically everyone you most want it not to be. Fine. But what does that actually look like in practice? This is where the three-part subset comes in. So in his book, Prophetic Reflections, the famous and controversial scholar Cornel West had a reflection on love that has powerfully informed my own understanding of it. This is not exactly the way West expressed it. It's not exactly his idea, but it's drawn from his ideas. And I'm going to go through it fairly quickly. First, love is not an emotion, right? It's not affection for the other. Instead, it's a process. And it begins with a serious commitment to the idea of imago Dei, to the idea that every human is made in the image of God, the imago Dei. There is no person, however inscrutable, messed up, or even wicked, who lacks that of the divine. And we are commanded to honor that always in everyone. So that's the first step. And you'd think that the second step would be to jump in and help people when they're struggling. But that's a common mistake because it skips over a crucial middle piece, which West calls analysis. So think about someone you know you love. If they experience some kind of loss, a spouse, a friend, a job, a dream, what do you do? won't you sit with them and listen while they talk about what happened to them and try to make sense of it? I mean, isn't that better than rushing in with a sloppy Joe casserole because you've forgotten your friend is vegan? I mean, we don't know what people need until we've heard them. But when we've heard them, and they tell us how we can help, then we get to step 3, which is action. Love that never gets to action is sterile. Faith without works is dead, right? So this is the process of love, and it can be summed up very simply as taking the other seriously, really seriously, by honoring the divinity within them, by hearing them out, not gaslighting them, not dismissing them, not saying they're oversensitive or they're overreacting, and finally by loving action that's informed by what we've heard and seen. So, who is our God? Our God is mystery, which we're invited to meet with awe. Our God is loving community, into whose love we are immersed in our baptism, and we're invited to practice living immersed in that our whole lives. Finally, our God, Hebrews tells us, is a consuming fire. There's a wonderful story from the Desert Fathers in which Abba Lot, Father Lot, goes to his elder, Abba Joseph. And he says, Abba, as far as I can, I pray my little office, I fast a bit, I read the Psalms, I mostly live in peace, and I try to purify my thoughts. Tell me, what else can I do? And Abba Joseph gets up, he stretches his hands toward heaven, and his fingers turn into lamps of flame. And he says, well, why not become fire? Our God is fire, passion, energy, active and attractive. And we are created as sparks off that fire, made to be alight with the same flame. Now, I understand that temperaments differ, and some people are more passionate, while others are more placid by nature. I get that. But placid people have their passions too. And has there ever been a saint who wasn't passionately in love with God, whatever that looked like? So what do we do with that? Well, we pay attention. Pay attention to what stirs your passion. Find God in it. And then bring the gift you find there to others. Maybe it's music. Maybe it's art or sports or working with children. Maybe it's writing poems or making sandwiches for homeless people. But somewhere, out of the mystery of the God in whose image we're made, out of the circle of loving community that draws us in to share that divine communion, out of the flame of passionate energy that set the disciples' hair on fire on that first Pentecost, out of that will come your very own call and ministry. Whatever your age, whatever your physical condition, whatever your finances, whatever your past, our triune God is drawn irresistibly to you, and draws you into the circle of their divine love. So, jump on in. I promise you won't regret it.